You don't have the right to lock this gate." That was the first thing I heard. Not a hello, not a question, but a scream. My HOA president, Karen Morrison, was standing on the other side of a galvanized steel fence, red-faced, veins popping in her neck, literally shrieking at me while she dialed 911 to have me arrested. And the irony? She was calling the police because I refused to open the gate to my own property for her party of 12 guests who were currently standing there with coolers, fishing rods, and a level of entitlement that you usually only see in royalty or toddlers. I stood there, stunned, watching my neighbors, people I had waved to just days before, actually cheering her on, muttering about this selfish new guy who was ruining their Saturday. They were treating my inherited fishing lake, a piece of land my grandfather bought with blood and sweat back in 1947, like it was a public park that I had somehow stolen from them. But here's the thing about Karen's rage: it was too loud. It was too certain. Most people, when confronted with a property dispute, hesitate. They check a map. They ask questions. But Karen didn't hesitate. She acted with the absolute, unshakable confidence of someone who owns the place. And that confidence made me suspicious. Why was she so sure she had the rights to a 3.2-acre plot that had been in the Brennan family for 70 years? I'm a retired real estate attorney. I spent 15 years tearing apart fraudulent contracts and exposing liars in courtrooms. So when my gut told me something was wrong, I listened. And when I finally went down to the county records office and pulled the actual history of that land, I discovered something that didn't just prove me right. It exposed a 3-year-long con that was so audacious, so criminal, and so lucrative that it would end up destroying Karen's entire life. My name is Michael Brennan, and this is the story of how a quiet fishing lake became the trap that caught the biggest predator in the neighborhood. It all started on a Saturday morning, around 9:30 a.m. I had only been living in the house for about 3 weeks. My uncle had passed away 6 months prior, leaving me the property I'd grown up visiting in the summers. It was my retirement plan. A quiet house, a big porch, and the lake. I'd run into town to grab some hardware for a loose shutter, gone maybe 2 hours tops. When I turned back onto Lakeview Drive, I saw it immediately. Smoke. Thick, gray barbecue smoke rising above the tree line right where my lake was supposed to be peaceful. And then the sound hit me. Classic rock blasting from a portable speaker and the distinct, happy chatter of a crowd. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I pulled into my driveway, killed the engine, and stared. There were 12 of them. They had set up a full encampment on the grassy slope leading down to the water. Coolers, fold-out chairs, a massive stainless steel grill that someone had actually dragged down the hill, and kids running around throwing rocks into the water. And standing in the center of it all, wearing a pink cardigan and holding a glass of white wine at 9:30 in the morning, was Karen. I had met her the week I moved in. She'd shown up uninvited, clipboard in hand, to inform me that while my property technically predated the HOA and wasn't a member, I should consider being a good neighbor and adhere to their guidelines regarding grass height and paint colors. I had politely told her no. Apparently, she didn't like that word. I grabbed my phone, switched it to video mode, and started walking down the hill. "Excuse me," I called out, keeping my voice level but projecting enough to cut through the music. "This is private property. I'm going to need everyone to pack up and leave." The music didn't stop. A guy flipping burgers glanced at me and rolled his eyes. But Karen turned slowly, a cold, tight smile spreading across her face like a crack in ice. "Mr. Brennan," she said, loud enough for her audience to hear. "We were wondering when you'd show up. You're disrupting our Member Appreciation Day." "I don't care what day it is," I said, holding the phone steady. "This lake is on my deed. You are trespassing." She laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound, and gestured to the families around her. "That's where you're wrong. This lake has been a shared community resource for the Lake View Meadows residents for over a decade. Just because you inherited a house nearby doesn't mean you get to hoard the water. See, that's a specific kind of lie. It's the kind that relies on social pressure." She was banking on me feeling like a jerk for kicking out families. But I wasn't a jerk. I was a lawyer. "Do you have documentation?" I asked. "Do you have an easement? A shared access agreement? Anything legal that gives you the right to be here?" Karen's smile faltered for a microsecond, her eyes darting to the side before locking back onto me. "I don't need to show you anything. It's on file with the county. We have rights." "Great," I said. Then I'm sure the police will be happy to review those rights. Go ahead, she snapped, pulling out her own phone. Call them. You're harassing us. I'll have you arrested for disturbing the peace. So I did. I called the non-emergency line and requested a deputy for a trespassing dispute. 20 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up, and out stepped Mark Hernandez. Small world. Mark and I had played varsity baseball together 20 years ago. Karen rushed him immediately. She was frantic, waving her hands, using words like hostile, threatening, and unstable. She painted a picture of me as some hermit trying to steal joy from children. Mark listened patiently, then walked over to me. Michael, he nodded. Been a while. What's the deal? Grandfather bought the land in '47, I said calmly. 3.2 acres. Inherited it 6 months ago. No easements. No permissions. I come home from Home Depot and find a block party on my lawn. Mark turned to Karen. Ma'am, do you have that paperwork you mentioned? The easement. I don't carry it on me, she huffed. It's in the HOA office. But everyone knows we have access. We've used it for years. Mark looked at me. I pulled up the PDF of my deed on my phone. Here it is, Mark. Recorded with the county. Property lines clearly mark the lake as private. Mark studied the screen, nodded, and handed it back. He turned to Karen. Ma'am, without documentation, the deed stands. This is private property. You need to leave. The meltdown was instantaneous. This is ridiculous. I know my rights. You're taking his side because you know him. I'm taking his side because he has a deed and you have a hot dog, Mark said flatly. Pack it up. Now. The walk of shame was long and loud. People grumbled, glaring at me as they folded their chairs. Karen stood by her car until the very end, staring daggers at me. You're going to regret this, she hissed as she got into her SUV. I have an entire community behind me. You're just one person with the law on his side, I replied. She slammed the door and peeled out. I walked back down to the water. It was a mess, trash, divots in the grass, a crushed no trespassing sign. I cleaned it up, then went to the heavy steel gate my grandfather had installed back in the '60s. I wrapped a heavy-duty chain around it and snapped a new padlock shut. But as I stood there, looking at the lock, Karen's words echoed in my head. It's on file. We have rights. She was so sure. Delusional, maybe, but sure. I went inside and called Tom Daniels. Tom is my old partner from the firm, a guy who eats property disputes for breakfast. Tom, I said, I need you to pull everything on Karen Morrison and the Lakeview Meadows HOA. Deeds, easements, filings, meeting minutes. Everything. You bored already? Tom joked. No, I said, looking out at the lake. I think I just stepped into a fraud. By Monday morning, Tom had the files, and my suspicions were confirmed, and then some. You were right, Tom said over the speakerphone as I paced my kitchen. There is no easement. In fact, 3 years ago, Karen filed a petition with the county asking for one, claiming historical use. The county denied it. Flat out. The rejection letter says, quote, trespassing does not constitute a transfer of rights. So she knows, I said, feeling a cold anger settle in my chest. She knows she doesn't have access, and she's lying to the HOA members. It gets worse, Tom said. I looked at the HOA budget. 2 months after that denial, Karen held a board meeting. She told the board that negotiations were promising and requested $15,000 for lake access acquisition and legal fees. They approved it. 15 grand, I whispered. Where did it go? Disappeared, Tom said. Vague invoices to consulting firms that don't seem to exist. But Michael, that's small potatoes compared to what I found in her emails. Emails. She's sloppy. She used her personal Gmail for HOA business. And she's been talking to a guy named Ron Harper, CEO of Harper Leisure Group. I froze. Harper Leisure was a massive developer. They built high-end, members-only recreational clubs. Karen has been pitching him a partnership, Tom continued. She's selling him on the idea of the Lake View Fishing Club. Exclusive, gated, premium memberships for 20 families at $50,000 a buy-in. She told him the HOA owns the access rights, and she's the gatekeeper. She's selling my lake, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She's trying to build a business on land she doesn't own. She took a deposit. Tom dropped the bomb. Harper wired her $200,000 last month as seed money to an LLC she controls. She's already spent half of it. I sat down at the table, staring at the phone. It wasn't just entitlement. It was grand larceny. It was wire fraud. It was embezzlement. Karen Morrison wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was a criminal mastermind who had bet everything on the fact that the owner of the lake, my uncle, was old and absent. She never counted on a retired real estate attorney moving in. "What do you want to do?" Tom asked. "We can go to the police right now." "No," I said, thinking about the neighbors who had glared at me, the people she had lied to for years. "If we go to the police, it's just headlines. I want the community to see it. I want the people she stole from to know exactly who she is." "The next HOA meeting is Wednesday," Tom said. She called an emergency session to discuss the hostile neighbor incident. I smiled for the first time in days. "Perfect. Let's get the presentation ready." Wednesday night, the community center was packed. Word had spread. The evil neighbor, who kicked out the families, was going to be there. I walked in and felt the room go cold. There were about 80 people, murmuring, pointing. Karen was at the front, standing behind a podium, looking like a martyr in a blazer. Beside her was a man in a cheap suit I didn't recognize. "Thank you all for coming," Karen began, her voice trembling with staged emotion. "We are here to address the unfortunate events of Saturday, where our community rights were violated by Mr. Brennan." She gestured to me. The room turned to glare. "We have invited a legal consultant, Mr. Thornton, to explain our implied easement rights," she said. The cheap suit guy stepped up and started mumbling about adverse possession and historical usage, using a lot of legal buzzwords that didn't actually mean anything in this context. He was stalling, trying to confuse people into thinking they had a case. I let him finish. Then I stood up. "Ms. Morrison," I said, my voice carrying easily to the back of the room. "May I have the floor?" "This is a member meeting," she snapped. "You are not a member." Actually, Helen Martinez stood up. Helen was the treasurer, a quiet woman who I had met secretly on Monday. I had shown her the bank records Tom found. She looked pale but determined. "As treasurer, I am yielding my time to Mr. Brennan. I think we need to hear this." Karen looked shocked. "Helen, what are you doing?" "Just listen," Helen said. I walked to the front, ignoring Karen's protests, and plugged my laptop into the projector system. Tom had helped me build a slide deck. Simple. Deadly. "My name is Michael Brennan," I said to the crowd, "and I want to show you what your president has been doing with your money." I clicked the first slide. It was the county denial letter from 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Karen petitioned for access to the lake. The county said no. They told her explicitly that you have no rights to the property. She never told you that. A murmur went through the room. "Is that true?" someone asked. Click. The next slide. The meeting minutes where she requested $15,000 for negotiations. "She asked you for money to fight a battle she had already lost," I said. "Helen, can you account for that $15,000? Helen stood up, holding a stack of papers. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "The invoices are fake. The money went into a shell account." The room was getting louder now. Anger was replacing the confusion. Karen was gripping the podium, her knuckles white. "This is a lie. He's doctoring documents." Click. The email chain with Ron Harper. "This is Ron Harper," I said, CEO of Harper Leisure. Karen told him she owned the rights to the lake. She sold them on a private club. Not for you. For paying members. $50,000 a buy-in. I looked at the crowd. "How many of you have 50 grand to spend on fishing?" "She took a $200,000 deposit," I said, putting the wire transfer receipt on the screen. "And she put it into an account solely in her name." I turned to Karen. She looked like she was going to vomit. "You didn't want community access, Karen," I said, my voice low and hard. "You wanted to clear the brush and build a dock so you could sell memberships to my land. You used these people. You used their dues to fund your fraud." "That's not true," Karen shrieked, but her voice cracked. "I was doing it for the property values." Then, the doors at the back of the room opened. Ron Harper walked in. He was a big man, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and he looked furious. Behind him was his lawyer. "Ms. Morrison," Harper boomed, his voice filling the silence. "My attorneys have reviewed the county records. You defrauded my company. We are filing suit immediately." Karen looked from me, to Helen, to Harper, and then to the 80 neighbors who were now standing up, shouting, demanding answers. Her face crumbled. The arrogance, the entitlement, the mask, it all fell away, leaving just a scared, greedy woman who had been caught red-handed. She tried to run. She actually grabbed her purse and tried to push past Harper to get to the door, but the crowd blocked her way. Not physically, they just didn't move. They stood there, a wall of judgment. "I'm calling the police," Helen said quietly. And that was it. The air went out of the room. Karen slumped against the wall, sobbing, not for what she had done, but because she had lost. The fallout was swift. The police arrived 20 minutes later. They took Karen in for questioning regarding the missing HOA funds. Once the district attorney saw the wire transfer from Harper and the fake invoices, the charges piled up fast. Wire fraud, embezzlement, grand larceny, forgery. It turns out, Karen had been living beyond her means for years, drowning in credit card debt, and she saw my uncle's lake as her winning lottery ticket. She thought she could bully the old man, and when he died, she thought she could bully me. She pleaded guilty to avoid a maximum sentence. She's currently serving 4 years in state prison. She lost her house, her reputation, and every dime she had to pay back the HOA and Harper. But the real change happened in the neighborhood. Helen took over as interim president. We sat down a week later, and she apologized. Properly. "We were sheep," she said. "We just believed her because she was loud." "It happens," I said. "We know we don't have rights to the lake," Helen said. "But maybe we could work something out? Legally." I thought about it. I thought about the kids I saw that first Saturday, running around. It wasn't their fault their leader was a crook. "Tell you what," I said. "I'll set up a program. For days a year. Community days. You sign waivers, you clean up after yourselves, and you respect the property. We put it in writing. A revocable license, not an easement. I retain control." Helen smiled. "That sounds fair. So now, for times a year, I open the gate. The neighbors come down. They grill hot dogs, away from the trees. They fish, and they say thank you. They treat the land with respect because they know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it is a privilege, not a right. And every time I unlock that gate, I think of my grandfather. He worked 2 jobs to buy this dirt. He taught me that land is responsibility. I protected it. I didn't use violence. I didn't use threats. I used the truth. And sometimes, when the sun hits the water just right, I think about Karen sitting in a cell, and I hope she realizes that the only thing she truly owned was her own integrity, and she sold that for cheap. So, to anyone out there dealing with an HOA tyrant or a neighbor who thinks boundaries are suggestions, don't get mad. Get the paperwork. Check the deeds. Check the minutes. Because bullies thrive in the dark, but they wither in the light of a paper trail. If you've ever had to fight for what's yours, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to see more stories about justice being served cold, hit that subscribe button. I'm Michael Brennan, and I'll see you down by the lake. Just call first.